All right, folks, gather around. There's plenty of food up the back there, and thanks to Kirsty and Carrie for organising that for us. You'll be able to get back to there at the end too. But if you want to stop up there and grab stuff on the way through, feel very free to do that. So, really nice to have you here. This is a little event we're hosting through the Lifestyle Medicine Health Research Centre. My name's Darren Morton. I'm the director of that, and I'm actually going to be doing the presentation today. And so we actually talked before about, should I just introduce myself? And then Carrie actually had the great idea that maybe Jason could introduce me. And I went, no way, no. We are not going anywhere near that. So, so I'll introduce myself. So, yeah, Darren, I think I know most of you anyway online. I'm not quite so sure about, but really nice to have you joining us as well. I've been here for a long time. This is my 31st year at Avondale. And that is thanks. I give thanks because I've got to be here for 31 years. Don't know if everyone else who's sort of had to associate with me gives thanks for it, but actually I got employed, and thanks to this guy over here, Wayne Miller. And so nice to have you with us today, here, Wayne. It was a long time ago. Wayne took a risk on a young fellow from Victoria. That when we were establishing a major in health and physical education here in our courses, and the rest is history. And so I was just saying to Wayne, man, my life trajectory would have been so much different if it hadn't been for you. So thanks, Wayne, and thanks for being here. It's really nice to have you here. This here is hot off the press, literally so hot off the press. I'm sure there are holes in it. Okay, but the exciting thing is you get to participate in this a little, because as we go through and share some of this data, there might be some great insights that you come up with, and we're in the process of writing the paper. I actually want to do a big shout out to Dr. Bevan Craig here, because he's been really busy, like literally late last night. Yeah, that's right. We'll if it's good, then it was all Bevan. He'll take credit there, won't you? That's right. If not, it was someone else. Look, this is something we've been working on for some years, but we've just got the latest iteration of the data. So literally late last night, we're still working away. So if there are some gaps or holes, then please forgive us for that. But if you see some insights that you think we should know about as we prepare for publication, please email me and share that with us as well. So I've titled this Exploring the Wellbeing of University Students, and I just want to set the context for this and give a bit of background. I love this because this is our website, and you can see it, itemises our purpose and our way and our impact. But if you look at the values, what is important to us here at Avondale, what I love is that third down, wellbeing features. And this is one of the many things that I love about Avondale. The fact that we have this emphasis, an intentional, deliberate emphasis on wellbeing. And that's been really part of our heritage. And I think it's really sort of knit into our DNA in many ways. As we know that Avondale, 1897, was established, grew out of the Adventist Church. And one of the sort of pioneers, actually, in the inception of both the church and Avondale, was Ellen White. And she has this quote, which is often sort of used to encapsulate this thing that's been referred to as the Adventist health message. And I often ruminate on this, and I actually think it's just so profoundly relevant for today. When you start to talk about things like pure air, sunlight, there's just so much evidence now looking at nature as medicine. So getting people outdoors, abstemiousness, not a word we hear often, but basically what it means is, well, there's a number of different interpretations, but it's about sort of, being a bit balanced in your approach to life. Not having to have the latest and greatest and all the stress that goes along with that. So sort of almost an antidote to affluenza, if you like. And I think this is quite intriguing, that it was penned way back then. Use of water, trust in divine power, exercise is in there, rest is in there, use of a proper diet. So these are really, what have been known as the Adventist health message. And when Avondale was first established, this was very much integrated into how we did business, and how things worked around here. And that has been a long history. As you know, we've been here for many years ago now. But what I don't know the early parts because I wasn't around those, but been around a good chunk of the latter part, and know others that have been around longer than I. Wayne over here as an example. And what we know is that we've actually had quite intentional strategies throughout the years to really highlight and spotlight this wellbeing aspect to what we do. So I was texting Wayne during the week and I said, remember before I arrived, I came in 94, I remember there was this class that students would often do that was all about basically wellbeing. And Wayne remembers it was called PE 150. We actually had some American counterparts who had been involved in helping to develop the health and wellbeing program here. And so they'd come over and they'd instigated that. So in the 1980s, that was certainly operating. Wayne, you were involved in teaching that as well. And as I understand, it was just more of an elective subject, but a popular one. And so many of our students did get involved in that. Then when I arrived, we actually set up another course called Fitness Applications. Like, who would put their hand up for that now? But back in the 90s, we had people who did. And so we actually ran that for a number of years. And I remember it would always culminate at the end of the semester with the students doing a 10-kilometre run, which they still love me for. I still remember Lana Hibbard was in my class when I first arrived as a young fella. Oh, is Lana there? Hey, Lana. And I don't know if you remember this, Lana, but I remember you actually doing the 10-kilometre and you must have torn a calf muscle or something at the end of it, because I remember you limping across the line and that having that look on your face as you eyeballed me. It was like, So anyway, great news. We actually still get our students to do a 10-kilometre challenge. Now, don't call it a run, but a 10-kilometre challenge at the end of the semester. So throughout the sort of 90s and 2000s, we had this. There was an elective. It was built into some as a core unit for some of the subjects. But I think we had some really quite pivotal things that have happened over the last sort of 15 years or so. In 2015, one very cool thing happened. We actually initiated the postgraduate courses in lifestyle medicine, which I think was really appropriate, and that's been a great thing. We actually had our first lifestyle medicine short course started last night, and we had 54 participants in that. So we've got some good things happening in the lifestyle medicine space. But the education course was coming up for reaccreditation, and I thank Peter Beamish. She was very actively involved in this. But when we were revitalising the education degrees, there were some speeches made that what's distinctive about Avondale. And what should be reflected in the courses that we deliver. And the speech was made that wellbeing should be part of it. And so we got it across the line. And in the accreditation process, it was agreed that we'd actually embed formally a unit of study called Foundations of Wellbeing into the first semester of all the education students. So all of the students doing primary, secondary, early childhood would all have to, that sounds harsh, or I'll use a politer term, but they had the opportunity and privilege to engage with this unit called Foundations of Wellbeing. And anyway, what happened, that was 2016. And I remember, in the first classes, some of the students walking in thinking, why am I doing this? Like, why do I have to do this? And our speech back to them was, here is the why. We know that caring for your wellbeing, all the evidence is so compelling that it will help your academic performance. And there's very strong connections to that, because it's hard to learn your best when you're not in a good place, with regards to your wellbeing. And not only that, we actually want to set you up for life. And we know that developing and growing wellbeing skills within you is going to help you, and it's also going to help those that are in your care into the future. And as future educators, we want you to be passing on these skills to your students. And so that was the speech. Within a couple of weeks within the semester, the students got it, and we actually saw some really great engagement. We had this foresight at that point in time to go, hey, let's collect some data here. And so what we actually did is we collected some wellbeing metrics at the beginning of the semester and then the end of the semester. And what we saw was some really quite encouraging improvements in the students' metrics and in their open-ended responses that they offered as well. And so here's where I'm very, very proud of Avondale. So it started with the education course. I think it was we did it again in 2017. We published a couple of papers from it. It was 2018 that the business course said we're actually going to embed it into our degree as well. This is so cool. What other business degree in Australia at a university do you know that in the first semester of the first year have a unit in wellbeing for their students? And if you think the education students came in thinking, why am I doing this? the business students, accountant students out going, Wellbeing? Why am I doing Wellbeing? And we just, and by this time we knew how the game went, and we just say, okay, come back to us in 3 weeks' time, and if you don't get it by then and you don't understand the value of this, then let's talk. We've never had one complaint. We've never had someone come back and say. So anyway, business adopted it. Then it was another course, another course, another course, and today took us a while to get the theologians across the line, but I'm proud of you guys and ladies. But now we actually, apart from nursing, it's my understanding that it's actually embedded into the course of all of our student our courses here. And what it did is actually set up a really nice opportunity to do some research. And so what we have done this year marks the 10th year that we've commenced this unit called Foundations of Wellbeing, team taught by Jace, Hims and myself. And we've been collecting data on the students at the beginning of the semester when they present in their bright-eyed, bushy-tailed in the first year of their first semester of the first year. And then we've been collecting these data again at the end to see what sort of changes, what have we observed. So just from a sort of methodological point of view, the sample, it's these students that have participated. And this year we actually have our largest cohort ever, which is fantastic. In the early years, we'd probably have about 60 to 70 students in the class. This year we have 220. So it's a great vibe. And I think they're enjoying it. We're at the beach at 6 a.m. this morning and doing class down there as they learnt why blue and green should often be seen. And they seem to be smiling and having a good time with it. So it's the students that are participating in that. Essentially what happens is in this unit, we teach, it's a multimodal approach, and essentially we look at all of the determinants, all the contributors we know to personal wellbeing. And so we look at nutrition, we look at activity, we look at relationships, we look at nature medicine, we look at service and give back, we look at sleep, we look at stress management, and we look at a whole plethora of all of the factors we know that can play into affecting people's personal wellbeing. And from a data collection perspective, at the beginning of the semester and at the end, they complete this sort of compiled wellbeing instrument, if you like, that actually has a number of different validated tools within it. So it's got, for example, the SF36. Some of you might be familiar with this. Within the SF36 instrument, there's a domain that looks at mental health, just general overall mental health, and vitality, which is a positive attribute of mental wellbeing. We use the DAS score, which is the depression, anxiety, and stress score. There's a question that asks about their satisfaction with life. There's a spirituality instrument in there. There's some questions about their perceived health, and also a flourishing scale as well, which is just sort of a measure of more sort of optimal sort of psychological functioning. And so yeah, we've been collecting data for some time. And so this is about to present, and this is why it's sort of so hot off the press. We've just collected the 10th year of data. And what's so fascinating about this is we can start to look at, well, what's happened, to these students in terms of what's the wellbeing look like of these students as they present to us in the first semester of their first year. So here's 10 years of data. If you want a busy slide, here it is. Okay. So, and once again, there could be holes in what we're seeing here because we're just crunching the numbers and going a bit crazy. Once again, thanks to Bevan for that. But what we see is that there are, if you look at these different factors, so for example, we're looking at mental health, vitality, depression, anxiety, stress, flourishing scores, and life satisfaction. Over the past decade, so keep in mind why this is such a fascinating data set. We've got COVID in there. We've got a couple of other, sort of really interesting things, is that there are some significant differences. However, they're not that great, intriguingly enough. So you look at, this is just like a basic ANOVA here. You can see effect sizes aren't that huge. Yeah, there's some significance. For some of the factors, they're not significant at all. Right? So there doesn't seem to be any significant changes in terms of the wellbeing metrics of these students as they present to us over the past decade. There are a couple things that sort of are, coming up, not big effect sizes. And when you run post hoc analyses on it, you actually, not a lot jumps out. I think, in fact, Bevan, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was only in anxiety. And I think 2023, there might have been a bit of a peak that we saw. So it was almost post-COVID that we saw the high levels. And so the interesting thing, there's not a lot there. If you dig a bit deeper and you sort of get a bit nitpicky and try and sort of really hone in, you do see there's some evidence of some trends. And the trends are that if you look, it seems like pre-2020, there's almost there's a differentiation there. So if we look at, for example, mental health and vitality, you can see sort of leading up to 2020, it's sort of a little bit greater, but the scales, by the way, so we've honed in on the scales. So we're talking about very mild trends, and once again, coming back to those original sort of ANOVA, not highly significant at all. But there's still a sort of that observation. You see similar sorts of things with depression, anxiety, and stress. It's like the world shifted just a little bit, just tilted just a tiny bit from pre-COVID to post-COVID. Here's some flourishing scores and life satisfaction. You can sort of see over that last 5 years. If you look at some other trends, there is and once again, we haven't had a great chance to really dive into the data yet, but it seems like certainly took a hit during COVID. There's signs of comeback a little bit. So anyway, yeah.
Are the scores that you're presenting, are they looking at the difference between a measure at the beginning and the end?
No, so this is part one. So this is just as the students present at the beginning of the semester, this is what they're saying. So this begs the question, like, I'm surprised by this. I actually thought that during COVID, we would have seen, quite significant changes in this, and where it's quite small and it's only in some variables, and the effect sizes aren't that great anyway. So what could explain that? This is where you get to contribute to the paper we're writing, right? So this is like hot off the press. We're only just sort of brainstorming, but here's one factor. Brett, you want to go first?
No, I'm going to ask a question about the first test, so I can understand the next part. Is it a time series analysis on these, or was it?
No, and they're not the same cohort. This is different people as they come into. Yeah.
So
no.
Whether that reliance on this out.
Yeah.
You get it, or if you put 95% complex growth around.
That's right. Yeah.
And that either side of that.
Yeah.
Might show that visually something.
Yeah.
Even though you might get a significant p-value.
Yeah, it's not
actually.
That's right. Yeah.
Just going to ask the sample, is that students on campus only?
No, all students, including in the distance, including our distance students in the class. Yeah. That have given permission, obviously, for their data to use, but I'm intrigued by this, that we're not seeing this big shift. So what could it be? And once again, we'd love some insights, love some ideas. One thing that has jumped out at us here, and I wonder are we talking about, because we know that the rest of the world didn't go that way. We actually know that mental health, in particular, very much suffered during COVID, and in some, we're seeing some evidence of bounce back within the general community and amongst other university cohorts. Could it be that we have quite an atypical cohort that we're looking at? And if we look at, for example, how they respond to their sort of religious affiliation, about 2/3 of our students that are coming through this class are Adventists. About another 20% or so, some other sort of Christian denomination, which means that now nearly 90% of these students are actually identifying with some sort of, Christian faith. And then we've got a few others as well. And what's interesting, and this is once again not causation at all, but just once again, this is all hot off the press, so we're just like trying to, catch our breath here. But when you look at the correlation between things like their spirituality scores and their personal belief scores, there's very strong correlations between these things. And so could it be that these students that are coming to us, we haven't done anything, boys, and this is no hats off to Avondale, because this is just when they front up. But when they front up, maybe they are quite atypical, and we're getting, largely a faith-based group of young people who have their personal beliefs. And you can see, down the end there, personal beliefs link very, very highly to metrics like flourishing, life satisfaction. So could it be that even during those COVID years, there was sort of that bit of buffering effect? Because to my mind, what happened for many people is that COVID just presented an existential crisis. And maybe for people who had a firm sort of belief system, they were able to sort of weather that a little bit more buffered.
Yeah, Darren, I'm wondering whether there would be any difference between those who are in Christian context and those who are not. Have you been able to separate them?
Yeah, we haven't done it yet, but it's probably going to be pretty hard because we have such a high proportion. So it's not a sort of balanced sample. So yeah, but that's why we just look at what's the correlation here, because within even within the Christian cohort of students, some have quite high spirituality scores and personal belief scores, some not so, and so we're seeing a bit of a relationship there. Yeah.
I wonder whether, if you looked at whether these trends, just the argument's sake, has that changed during that cohort? So from 10 years to now, has that changed? Because could that be, if it has changed, the protective factor in there, that has changed particularly during that years. Similarly with age, similarly with age being, sorry, when they're going into to study there, for example.
Yeah.
Heaps of those other measures where you can
Yeah.
look at are there those changes over time.
Yeah.
Which is probably the important thing in case one of those protective mechanisms to explain what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's great. So I don't know if you remember.
The number of adverts across the campus is fairly stable.
Very so. And I think when we did run the analysis on spirituality scores and personal belief scores, it was not a lot of difference across the decade as well. So age is an interesting one because we can't do a lot with it because they're all so tightly bound. We're looking at sort of, it's the first year students. We get a couple of ring-ins, so a couple of old people that are like, I'm not going to say, Jace, you're putting out your hand as a demonstration of old person. So, yeah, so it's a bit hard with that one. We've got very narrow age band range.
What week is this survey?
This is a really, because I'm gonna come back to when we look at part 2 of the data in just a moment. But you're right, it's actually in pretty much their second week. So we actually encourage them to start completing it by the Thursday of their first week, and they have about 4 days to do it. So yeah, it's pretty much end of week 1, beginning of week 2 that they're completing it.
So could this be a representation of stresses of starting a new degree that have changed over the last 10 years?
Yeah. And
lifestyle outside of.
Yeah. They're big. I was going to allude to this too. They're obviously big limitations with what we're seeing. However, it's consistent. Whatever these students are experiencing, moving away from home, that's a mass. That can make a huge impact on some of them. Being in the door, all those sorts of things. But if you could try and sort of say that sort of gets ironed out by the fact that it's still a consistent thing that they're encountering over the course.
That's really curious. I'm wondering if there is a lag effect that COVID would have affected the younger kids more, and then obviously
Well, that's interesting. Yeah. Well, we're sort of seeing some of those students come through now, like in 2025 and earlier. Sure. What I might do, I might keep going with the second part, and then we'll have some time for questions at the end. Oh, they might not have heard the question. Okay, sorry. Some people online, I'll try and speak the question again before we respond so that you can hear it too. All right, so the first part was really, what this has allowed us to do is go, okay, past 10 years, let's have a look and see what's happened to the wellbeing of the students as they're presented. The second part, this is a bit trickier to answer, but you know what, we've been intentional about this. We've embedded this into, the curriculum. Does it make a difference? Is that helping in some way? And so the big problem here, obviously, is that we don't have a control group, and we have variation in times when people are collected. So it's sort of the end of week 1, beginning of week 2, they do the baseline, and then it's week 12/13 that they're doing the last one. So that's a stressful period for the students. So what's that doing to their sort of changes? But anyway, this is the story that we see when we actually do it. Pretty much in every domain, we see significant improvements in these metrics. So once again, in the absence of a control group. However, what I will say, but I do want to really acknowledge that as a limitation, the magnitude of the changes are quite similar to what we see when we've run trials that do have control groups. So within the treatment arm because for those who don't know, that in this unit, Foundations of Wellbeing, they do this intervention that we call the LIFT project that we use in other settings and run in different contexts. So the content they're learning things they're experiencing are very similar to that. And the changes we see are similar to what we see in the controlled trials. What interests me so much about this, though, is that these are just sort of, average changes. But within the cohort, we've actually got quite a few of our students that are doing pretty good. And so we've actually just looked at what happens if you stratify that data for the different factors. And probably the most well-known and most easy to stratify is the depression, anxiety, stress scores, because the DAS instrument has very clear categories of, it's used en masse. We know that, hey, this is what a normal range looks like. This is what, so on and so on. And this is what we see. And this I actually find super encouraging. Once again, acknowledging all the limitations associated with this study. But here is the depression category. And you can see, within that particular cohort, so we're talking about, we've got data on over about 720 students now. So it's a large data set. In terms of the students according to the DAS instrument, about 560 odd of those have no, detectable or no normal levels of what we would consider ratings for depression in that. But then some of our students, and builds up to a couple of hundred of them out of that cohort of around 720, they do have, some challenges going on, from mild, you can see for the depression, 71, moderate depression scores, 58, severe, and extremely severe. And when you look across at what sort of change is occurring within those categories, actually, what's most intriguing about this maybe relates to, I haven't thought this through, so probably ignore this if this is a stupid thing that I'm about to say. But what's interesting, if you look at in the normal category, basically there's no change. Right? So actually we're seeing for people who are, in fact, in some of them, they've gone the other direction, which probably isn't an encouraging story, but it's negligible. Look at the effect size, it's pretty much nothing. But you know what? It might be that from week 1 to week 12, it's actually more stressful here than here. So maybe, if you're just doing normal stuff, it's actually a bit more taxing. But, and if that is the case, it makes the rest of the results even more encouraging. Because what we're seeing is that the more people are struggling, the bigger the improvement we're observing amongst that particular category. So what and you see the same thing with anxiety here. Look at, for example, normal category, 2% change, but mild, 29% change, moderate, 38% change, severe, 37% change, extremely severe, 41% change. And look at the effect sizes. I don't know if that means much to any of you, but I know for some it does. We're talking about huge effect sizes here. And so, look, with all, once again, acknowledging all the limitations associated with the fact that we don't have a control group and all the rest of it, to me, this is probably the most encouraging, exciting thing and message that I'm super passionate about sharing, is that what we're actually doing here, we've actually embedded something, a wellbeing initiative within our courses of study. Right, so there's no stigma attached to anyone participating, because we all have to do it, and the actual course is presented in a positive way. There's no psychoanalysis in the course. Basically, what we do throughout the course is we go, let's look at what the science says about things you can do to lift your mood in your life. Right, so let's explore what it says about physical activity, and then let's try that for the week. So basically, they go on this sort of educational adventure where they get to learn and experience these things, and so everything's positive. There's no stigma attached to participation, but guess what's happening? Those who need it most seem to be benefiting most. And to my mind, that changes everything. This is the way to do mental health prevention, right? Because we're all in. This is what we refer to this as universal prevention. And yet the upside is that those who need it most probably get the most benefit from it. So, once again, acknowledging we don't have a control group in here. What we do have, though, which sort of, is this just a seasonal thing? Is this, I know that, could this just be regression to the mean? And we know that, people's mental health is doing this all the time. Could it just be, and generally, if people are not doing so great, they're going to swing back a little bit on their own anyway, right? So there is that sort of, that regression to the mean aspect, but these are pretty compelling changes that we're observing here. And we have a truckload of qualitative data as well. So we actually have open-ended responses from the students, and we are just scratching the surface of that one. But already what we're starting to see, just using thematic analysis here, is there's this consistent messaging that, hey, you know what? Like this quote here. That's my daughter, by the way. I just had to get like a shameless plug in because I'm proud of her. But she didn't say this, by the way. But I've learned so much about how to improve my wellbeing. In every lesson, I learned new things that have worked, and when I put it into practice, I feel so much happier. This is a consistent theme that we keep seeing emerge. So, you know what? Can we lean heavily on the quant data? Well, there's a good story to be told there, but I recognise that it's open to criticism as well because of the methodology. But there's some really nice qualitative stories coming out of it as well. I'd love to hear your reflections and stories, but in my biased opinion, this sounds really bad from a researcher's perspective, but I choose to believe that actually this intentionality that we've had towards wellbeing, in a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, 2022, we even strengthened what we're doing in the Foundations of Wellbeing unit by adding the ACE Lab experience, which Jace Hinz does an amazing job with that, and the stories that come from students there are really quite profound. But I actually think this is playing into the great ratings we get. This is why we can be proud of this. And once again, I don't know. Well, maybe I don't know. There's a lot I don't know. But what other universities are embedding formal wellbeing education into most of their courses of study? I don't know any are. It is phenomenal, and I'm very, very proud of Avondale for that. And I do think that it's playing into these high, ratings that we get from student satisfaction. And I think it's something that we can be super proud of. And what I think is most pertinent is that it speaks to the fact that we practice our values, right, and we implement them. Because you know what, everyone's talking about wellbeing nowadays, right? And I hear universities do it and schools do it. We're a wellbeing school. Yeah, well, what does that look like for you? Right? Where does the rubber meet the road for you? And I think we have some really tangible examples where we can point to and say, this is what we're doing, and it's having an impact. So I'm going to stop talking. Brett, tell us, where did we go wrong, brother?
Fantastic. It's great. Fantastic stuff. Really. And I think the qualitative stuff will really add to the challenge. To the story. So that, it is what it is. But fantastic. But just a few queries and thoughts to make.
Yeah.
When the analysis was matched at the individual.
Yes. For pre-post, yeah.
One thing that I found.
Oh, just for our distance students, just the question was the data match pre-post, which it was, yeah.
The other interesting thing we think about the changes in those categorical things, I think more meaningful than the mean changes.
Yeah.
Would be portraits of people who have moved from one category.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
And I reckon that would be really fascinating. How many people move from a mild to a moderate, or mild to whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And that would be fascinating. I also envisage some kind of graph where you've got the longitudinal means for each year, but the comparator is by year.
So that one again.
You've got points for your 10 years, but you mean or whatever. Yeah. But your comparison with that year. So what was the pre-post for that year, and do that for every year.
Oh right, yes, yeah.
See if those differences have actually maintained. It's again one of those sort of sensitivity analysis you can do that tells the same story. Like every year we're saying and seeing a consistent result, or was there bigger improvements in certain years associated with, or lower associated with things like COVID? Yeah. So interesting. So that's a great insight. Let's write these down. I actually have. I did this without one time when you weren't there. Just I played around just to look at is the change that we're observing different across the years, and it did seem to be evidence that through the COVID years you see significant improvements leading up to it, and then in the COVID years we didn't see much improvement, average improvements, but. What's interesting about that is we know that everyone else was going backwards. And this is why something like that can reinforce the story with the limitations you've got. Yes. Because seeing if that was the case, that less improvement in those communities, it's still a protective factor. And actually fits the narrative of what was going on at the time. Yeah. So it helps you explain this in a positive way. That, yes, there's regression of the mean, but there's this these other little bits of data
that help it. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, really good. Yeah. Yes, Jason. Big voice, please, so everyone can hear.
You mentioned about one of the weaknesses not having a control.
Mm.
I'm wondering, to me, you want to play with as little variables as possible, and to me, you've got an almost equal size group in nurses that have a similar, different course, but it's as close as you're going to get to them having a group starting at the same institution. And it could be that the normal ones that drop before, for the nursing cohort who are not getting this, they drop down here.
Yeah.
And then you've got more to report on.
It's a great thing. You know, this is the frustration, is about 2017, I thought, we need a control group, nurses. And so I almost was going to get it going and never really got around to it because life is busy. And it's now, this is the frustration from a research perspective. You go, oh, now we've got like, because, this thing accumulates. It's actually quite an exciting thing to go, we've got 10 years of data here. There's a valuable contribution to be made, to the community here. So I lament the fact that I didn't kick that off 10 years ago. But yeah, well, thanks. Yeah, I'll get onto it. But yeah, no, it's a great, yeah, that's right. It's a good thing.
But you've got such a big data set. Can you not even get a snapshot of what happened this semester if you've not been too late and lazy?
Well, the problem is we just haven't been collecting those pre-post measures on the.
No, but had you done it this semester?
Yeah,
we
could start
something to tell a bit of the story to support.
Yeah,
this.
Yeah. Our problem is very shortly the nurses will be doing this class as well. That's wink, wink. Who am I winking at? Right.
Have you got any data on fidelity of interventions? So like how much people engaged or complied with the actual course itself?
Yeah.
And that could you use that as a control group?
Yeah, that's good.
Or match some group that.
Yeah, there's a massive data set here. What we do, where they complete a workbook where they actually record their level of engagement with all the stuff that they're doing, but it's not automated. So the process of entering that just terrifies me. But yeah, there's scope for that as well.
Can we use AI to scan them?
In time, probably. Yeah.
Well, we can speed it up a little. There's people around the skills too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great. Yeah. Well, they come up with a score out of 100 for each week as to how much they've engaged with the various topics, and then there's questions like, the potential. Bev and I sit there sort of swimming with the ideas, but we could examine, for example, well, what are the most impactful strategies for people? What's making the biggest difference, and for who? Is it different for males, females? There's just. It's a really rich data set that we've got. Yeah.
This is really, really great research. Just my curiosity would be, is there any way or any idea of tracking these through their study post doing the course? And then longitudinally, like you've got 10 years worth of data, could you go back to those same batch of students who started and see what difference there is in how they're actually going?
Yeah, that's another. What we have done, and we haven't done it as an official study, but we've gone back to the fourth year students and actually asked, are you basically looking at health literacy? Are there things that you learnt then that you're doing today? And it was really interesting that about 90% of the students, and once again, it's completely anecdotal, so there's no formal study that's been done. About 90% of the students could tell things that they learnt then that when they need to, they might not be doing on a daily basis, but they learnt some skills that when they need it, they will actually activate in their life now. So that was 3 years later. But yeah, it'd be great to go back. There's huge opportunity to do a whole lot of different stuff. Yeah.
What journal are you going to submit?
I've actually got two. So we're cleaving that up. So we're going to do the first one. We're looking at the 10 years. Not sure about that one yet, but the other one looking at telling the bigger story of when we're actually implementing a form that will be the International Journal of Wellbeing. So we're ahead of the game. Look, honestly, when you look at the university sector, there's great interest in wellbeing, and we've got an amazing story to tell. And so, yeah, we're really keen to get this out there and saying, hey, look, this is what we're doing, because we're leaders in this space. And I think we can take a lot of, we're really proud of that.
I think a lot of other universities might be interested in adopting this approach just because everybody's got to do something about helping their students.
Yeah.
Once they see
One of my biggest... What's that? Yeah. One of my biggest learnings over the years is that if you want people to engage in a wellbeing initiative, they need to meet one of two criteria. A, they need to be either desperate and looking for solutions, or B, they need to be forced to do it. And what I think is this great opportunity in education is that we need to say, this is what we're doing. Right? There's no stigma attached to it, but when it's part of something you have to engage with, you're basically being forced to do what's good for you. And I actually think it's a great way forward. Yes, Dr. Beamish.
One of the interesting things in the wellbeing space is, like, I was just reading a thing last night, just because I don't know the study, but they were now saying the current generation alpha, whatever they call, are the worst off with respect to wellbeing of any of the generations. And so they're now the loneliest. Like for years, the post-65 were the most loneliest, but now this youngest group are the most loneliest. You go through all the metrics and they're just about on the bottom of everyone. Now, we've done school-based wellbeing programs that from the time a kid is in year 7, their wellbeing dips down to when they're in year 9 and 10, and then hopefully starts to bounce back a bit. So in schools, K-12 schools, our aim is to try and stop the dip. And if you're doing a wellbeing intervention, people say, did you enhance their wellbeing? Well, we did, but it's not better than they were in year 7, but it's not as bad as it would have been in year 9 if they don't think that sort of attitude. Yeah. I'm just wondering, with that group is going to be hitting our first year students. It's going to be our first year students, that really low wellbeing group soon. And so it's not just in COVID we found this, almost like the year was the determinant. It could very well be the environment that generation comes out of becomes the major determinant of where these things are at.
That's true.
And I just wonder if the program needs to be tweaked in any way to actually match that set of people.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah. For sure.